Let's get on board then. Jim Rogers, who's author, Street Smarts, Adventures on the Road and in the Markets, now joins us on the show from Singapore. Jim, hi, always a pleasure to have you on the show. How do you view India now as Narendra Modi is all set to form his own government with a historical mandate? Do you see a better sense in policies and reforms now going forward?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, he says a lot of wonderful things. Now, sometimes his actions are not so wonderful, but he says a lot of wonderful things. He seems to understand what needs to be done. And my goodness, if somebody can finally solve India or even turn India around after decades of just abysmal government and abysmal bureaucracy, it will be fantastic. If he opens India up, if he makes the currency convertible and he opens the markets, even I would be extremely excited about investing in India. Is he going to do it? I don't know. He's got a big bureaucracy to fight, and he's got an upper house of parliament to fight.
Sure, Jim. The equity markets are clearly on the excited side, but commodity and currencies are still watching out on what kind of reforms he gets there. But then also coming in for a larger picture, then there are some El Nino concerns with the monsoons for India and some other producing nations too. Do you see then a threat of higher food prices for 2014?
Well, I'm optimistic about agricultural prices. It's one of the most exciting areas of the world economy in the next few years. So yes, I am optimistic about prices going higher. I have no idea about it. I'm not a weatherman. I have no idea what's going to happen. Now, the weather people say it's coming, and it's going to affect weather as it always has in the past. If so, it's just another reason to be optimistic about agricultural prices.
As we were talking about the Indian markets though, Jim, the Indian equity markets have hit an all-time highs, the FI inflows have been robust, and the Indian rupee has been appreciating as well. Do you see this as a long-term developing pattern then?
No, I don't, unless the new government can come through and make some dramatic, exciting changes in India. India now still has a debt to GDP ratio that's very, very high. It historically has made it difficult for countries to grow in a rapid way. You know, he's got a huge opposition, but if he can do it, if he can change India finally after decades of mismanagement, it will be an extremely exciting place to live, invest, do business, etc.
Fair point that, Jim. And we are awaiting that cabinet in the evening as well to see whether it's a proper team that the markets have been anticipating here. But let's talk about the commodity space, and the most investors are bearish for gold for a second straight year as the equities as an asset class is performing better. What's your view on the gold and silver, and what price levels are you now expecting?
Well, I own gold and I own silver. I've never sold any. If it goes down, if they go down more, I hope I'm smart enough to buy more. I'm not buying at the moment because this consolidation, which has been going on a couple of years, in my view, will continue. Remember, gold went up 12 years in a row without a down year. Now, that anomaly is probably going to be repeated in the correction. The correction will be more unusual than most corrections, just as the rise was. If it goes down, no, I assure you, I'll be buying more gold and more silver.
Well, when you talk about gold, the market or the industry here has very strong expectations from the new government as well. How would you look at the India easing curbs on gold imports, and do you see this increasing Indian imports and ease the unofficial channels via which the gold has been coming into the markets?
Well, I read those changes. I didn't see that they were terribly significant. Now, maybe it's because I'm too simple-minded to understand them. But if India really opens up its gold markets again, of course, that would be very good for the world, certainly the gold world, and people are interested in it. But that particular change I didn't see as being very significant. And as you know, people have been smuggling gold into India anyway, so I'm not sure it's going to do much more than just offset some of the smuggling.
Well, that's quite interesting on your screens though, because even as the international gold prices have been rising, the Indian prices on your screens have continued to decline. The last 1 month, 3 month and the 6-month charts all show negative when it comes to the Indian markets. Of course, because of the latest RBI norms, you also have seen those premiums go off, and that's the reason that decline does show on your charts. But Jim, the crude oil prices, and those have seen strength on the back of Ukraine and Russia issues. On one side, you have the U.S. supplies, which are near record highs. And on the other side, there are these supply-demand plays, the geopolitical concerns. Where do you see the crude prices taking next cues from?
No, because remember, all the other known reserves in the world are in decline. Even if the supply from the U.S. is rising, and it has been, remember, everywhere else has declining reserves because there have been no great oil fields discovered in over 40 years. So yes, we have a rise here, but we have declines here, and that's a problem.
Jim, while we have spoken about agriculture and the weather concerns as well, it's interesting to see how the sugar prices are now performing, because after 3 years of decline in the prices, we are perhaps looking at the first deficit year in the global markets, and you also have seen the sugar prices gain up from here. Are you expecting further strength?
Well, I own sugar, so I certainly hope so. See, I got my sugar. I picked it up at the restaurant this morning, so by all means, I'm bullish on sugar. You can ask me in a couple of years.
We will do that, Jim. But how would you look at the dollar index also now, because that has been trying to hold above that 80 mark? Would you say that even as the economic data has been good and the U.S. Fed has been consistent in tapering, the euphoria isn't really reflecting in the U.S. dollar?
Well, not yet. It certainly doesn't for a variety of reasons. I happen to own the United States dollar. Recent developments in Europe, of course, are certainly not good for the euro. I own the U.S. dollar and have not sold any. In fact, I probably should buy some more if I weren't talking to you.
Jim, also, what is your sense about the Indian rupee now? Because if you look at the bullish bets, those are at 2-year highs. And you also have seen the other Asian currencies not do as well. The rupee really has gained up by 5.3% in the current year, the best performer in the Asia-Pacific region. How are you looking at the rupee going forward?
Well, when you say that things are at 2-year highs, 1-year highs, etc., I don't like buying anything that's at a high. I prefer buying things at the low. So of those, the ones you mentioned, I'd rather buy the Chinese currency because it has been going down. It has been correcting for a while. It's not at a low by any stretch, but it's certainly been correcting this year. So of those, I'd rather buy the Chinese currency than the others, which are making exciting new highs, at least exciting for the people who own them.
Jim, final question before we let you go. And any advice that you would want to give the investors, or what are you holding in sense of investments in this current year?
Well, Russia, I'm still trying to find some more things to buy in Russia. Agriculture, maybe some Chinese shares based on what the economic conference in November decided, what China's going to put a lot of money in the next 10 or 20 years. Maybe some more Japanese shares. I'm not doing a whole lot, but I never do a whole lot. Best for me is just to sit and watch.
All right, Jim, we will let you go at that. Thank you so much for joining us with all of your sense on all of those countries and, of course, investment ideas. That, of course, is Jim Rogers, who's telling you that Russia and China look interesting. He's holding his investments in sugar and gold as well at this point in time. And, of course, US dollar index is something that he feels can see some pressure from here on. But with that, that's all the time that we have on the FNO show. Giving it out to Neeraj and Tanveer for closing trades.